This is the unrestricted free agent.
Welcome into the program. Glad you're here. And I just pulled my microphone completely off the table.
I think South Carolina's catching Clemson. I really do.
Defense, I'm going to tell you right now, they're nasty. They're going to be nasty all year.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
Who knows what's real and what's not even anymore?
When you see black and white and you're calling it purple, I got problems with that.
And LT, I told you, it's all about the tear down.
How about that for a start? Oh, I should go slow clap, shouldn't I? Come on, guys, get in on it. Friday morning slow clap. College football. It's back, baby. It's here. Well, almost here, right? It was back last night. Man, this morning has felt like just an absolute breeze. You know, starting the show in May. I don't know if you guys know this, but in the state of South Carolina, May, June, July, a little slow on the sports calendar. So looking for excellent content to provide some entertainment and information for you sometimes is a bit of a struggle before a show. Sometimes it feels like some actual work. I know it's a tragedy, really. But this morning, there's so much to get to. Last night, welcome back, college football. I mean, I think we're all greedy as fans in general. I know I am. I'm a greedy fan. I'm a snobby fan. Like, oh, it wasn't really a great game. I wanted it to be better. No, last night, oh, so good. Not just the backyard brawl, which was fantastic and gut-wrenching for West Virginia. It has everything. 75 miles apart of the schools, and they don't like each other, and it was pretty well played. You got basically a Southern Cal alum game breaking out at quarterback, JT Daniels and Keaton Slovis, and a freshman running back for West Virginia just absolutely bursting on the scene of college football. Fantastic. Then after that gets done, you flip over to Penn State and Purdue. Tremendous. 7 lead changes, I think? Sean Clifford's been playing in the NCAA since I think he took over for Kerry Collins. And he somehow rises above his decade-long run of mediocrity and leads Penn State to the win. Wow. What a fantastic way to kick off the college football season. Hope you guys checked it all out. If you didn't, we can discuss this morning, but there's so many things to talk about. Yeah, Nick, great point. He just starts with 2 damn good games last night. Shame that Purdue choked at the end. Shame with West Virginia, too. Receiver been good all night. Right? I mean, you could not draw up a better pass to him. Timing-wise, route-wise, accuracy, right in the chest. Both hands were up. It just went right through, popped right up. Pick 6. Much better than the puke 6 that Purdue had. How rude are you, by the way? You don't even give a heads up on social media in your caption like, hey, heads up, this you might not want to watch somebody puking. I get it. It's a novelty. You don't see that very often. A guy with, 72 yards, Division II transfer, who had 15 career picks in Division II, I think. It was a huge play. And then, then he puked right afterwards. But don't pop it up on my timeline. Make me see it all. Come on, man. Come on. I can tell already. You guys are feeling it. DC was in first this morning. 7:17. We stream at 8 o'clock. He doesn't care. He's in. I was in at like 5 a.m. the other day. Impressive stuff. Anthony, as always. Good morning, UFAs. Happy game day eve, everybody. DC giving the first official welcome back, Sir Big Spur, to the depth chart. So was the general a different rooster, or was he the same one? It never existed. only existed in a PR world. We'll get back in. We'll touch on that briefly. I am happy to put that thing to bed. Again, if we have to talk about that anymore, that's about the only thing that can change my mood this morning. Roger's in a sunny mood, as always. RL's biggest takeaway from this week: I need to take more of an effort to huddle up with my family and break the huddle with 1, 2, 3 family. Stuart Lake, a great rant yesterday. Hope you saw it. If you didn't, you can go to the YouTube channel. I got that segment rolling from yesterday's program about culture, difference between Will Muschamp and Shane Beamer, and the excellent rant from Stuart Lake. And it just authentic, right? A coach who's been there, and you hear another coach preach about family or culture or the whole thing, but then you see it's not that, and you can sniff kind of the inauthenticity, if that's a word. Ken's, good to see you, and with a good morning. And did I just see Ken's just join the club there on the YouTube channel? Just subscribe, but you've been in on the show for weeks now, it seems like. Thanks for hopping on the subscription train there. And if you haven't right now, if you're in on the program, you haven't subscribed to the show, please do so on YouTube. If you want to follow it on the podcast platforms, it's all over the place. If you're old school, you just want to go radio in the morning, you just want the audio version of this thing, you can go to Podbean, and we're streaming live, just audio from that standpoint. That's also the easiest place to get to all the podcast platforms. You're one click away to subscribe to wherever you prefer to get the podcast version of the program. So RLN, I like that he gave his takeaway first and then just the general good morning. Well, feel free just to hop right in, like Roger did after his sunny good morning. Big weekend in sports in South Carolina. Not only Carolina kicking off, Clemson kicking off the season on Monday night, the Southern 500 at Darlington Sunday night. Now relegated to the USA Network, though it's the first NASCAR playoff race, and that kind of, I know that it doesn't make Roger happy. To me, it kind of sums up where the sport is in a lot of ways. Went too big, completely outkicked its coverage, and lost kind of the core audience, and that's where it is. Chris on the Facebook live stream, morning, fellow Gamecocks. 1 day left, and he says, "Sir, Big Spur lives on." Oh man, a bunch of you guys still in here. Picks, happy day before kickoff. We got Nick in earlier, the Puke 6 trademark it. Now, I didn't come up with that. That was all over social media last night. It was disgusting. Stinks when your hands, and Daddy-O says, block the view of the ball. It was brutal. John, that's what college football is now. He says, I don't think I've ever seen so many targeting calls. I was impressed. I think most of them last night overturned. I didn't see any unjust ejections. I remember one ejection from last night that seemed about right, and that's what it needed to be. 4:30 yesterday, Tim. I got booted. DC, I have no idea what that means. Oh, 4:30. Yeah, the comment in the first good morning was at 4:30 yesterday, 4:30 a.m., and then it was so old, it didn't even make the live chat during the show. All right, John's in with the hashtag Geritol. If you know, you know. If you guys don't know about that, that's also another YouTube channel show segment. Corey Miller earlier this week. Story time with LT is going to be fantastic. We're going to get it every Monday. By the way, I don't even know where we are. You guys maybe put in your votes. Monday show coming up on Labor Day or no? Let me, as opposed to that. That's a dumb way to put that, right? I would imagine if you're sitting here on a Friday morning, you'll vote for it, yes. But you don't have to be there, so it doesn't affect you. I guess my question will be, do you plan on being where you are right now on a Monday? And then does it make sense to do a Monday show? That's how I should put that. RIP, the general. Yes. August 29th, 2022 to September 1st, 2022. That's how long it lasted. Gamecock football honoring Tommy Suggs last night, headed into his 50th year on the Gamecock radio network. 50th year. Do the math. Incredible. Quarterback of that 66, ACC championship team for the Gamecocks. Going into year number 50, and John appreciates the manners that Shane Beamer uses when addressing Mr. Suggs. Chris says, I watch it on Facebook, but still subscribed on YouTube. Exactly, Chris. You get it. Well done. Thank you. That Gamecock Guy podcast. Good morning to all. Good Gamecock morning to all, he says. Nick's all in on the Monday show. He says, need some weekend recap. Hopefully a good recap for the Gamecocks. RL giving me permission to take Labor Day off, run a pre-recorded show or a best of clip show. Well, that's the deal, RL, right? You can always just watch your pre-recorded show because it automatically archives. The best of clips show I kind of already have up and running on the YouTube channel with the show segments. Chris says, if you want more comments from me, then do a Monday show. I'll be up. Too used to getting up at 4 o'clock every morning. The Toasters in with hope the Juice can kill him by scoring a touchdown tomorrow. I think killing him would be scoring multiple touchdowns. Or Anthony also giving me permission for Monday off. So I'm guessing we will not do a Labor Day show. We'll move Corey Miller's segment maybe to Tuesday. We'll combine it with Rick Sanford, a Tuesday extravaganza to recap the weekend. We'll see. I'll keep you guys updated on social media. Tim Hill UFA, where you can get the social media all over the place, Twitter mostly recently. That Juice Wells thing blowing up this week. It is finally here. College football at its finest in a lot of ways, right? From a Gamecock perspective, Carolina, Georgia State, not a dream matchup, not a nationally headlining kind of matchup, but it's got plenty of local ties, right? Sean Elliott coming back, and we'll hear a little bit from what he had to say in his weekly press conference so you can get a feel from where he's coming. Man, I forgot the intensity. I didn't forget it, but I was reminded of the intensity, just how kind of he operates, the cadence, the whole thing. I played golf with him back in the day in one of Steve Spurrier's media deals. Talked to him multiple times as a TV nerd through the years, doing the preseason preview special that will air on ABC Columbia tonight at 7 o'clock. Mike Gillespie was on yesterday talking about that. And it was always just the energy and the outlook, the positivity. Sean very much like Shane Beamer in that way, but just like intensity times 10 when you talk to him. Like Shane is really interesting that he is intense, but he doesn't comes off as kind of a laid back guy or almost a happy go lucky kind of guy. Sean Elliott does not come off that way. Comes off much more like a typical football coach, I would tell you. You guys are all in this morning. I'm trying to make sure I keep up with the comments. I love it. A Festivus for the rest of us on Tuesday. Sounds good. Nick, all right, appreciate the permission to move on to a Tuesday show. 10-2, Jeremy says. Let's go. And I'm not one of these fans that says that every year, but we have something special. Let's enjoy it, man. Let's go. Good for you, Jeremy. I love that you're in on that. So I got one of the things I want to talk about today, and since you brought it up, we might as well pop it up first, and I'll do a little recap of everything that went down last night in just a second. Biggest preseason myth. You guys think about that maybe as we're talking about what went down last night. But what do you think? You got to pick one thing that's been talked about, continues to be talked about, will be talked about all through the rest of today's discussion, tomorrow morning's game day, the whole thing, the way it's presented right now. What do you think is the biggest myth out there? Jeremy's thinking it's 5.5 wins, 6 wins you can get in Vegas. Regular season win total for the Gamecocks over under 5.5 or 6. So if you're thinking they're going to go 10-2, you're thinking that's I don't know if you got a bigger myth out there. I'm interested in hearing what you think because it happens every year. Go look at preseason magazines, right? Like last year, the biggest myth out there is that Spencer Rattler and DJ Uiagalelei were 2 of the best players in college football and going to be battling for a Heisman Trophy. That clearly turned out to be a massive myth. And now that leads into one of the most interesting regular seasons I think that we've seen in the state of South Carolina, being a Huge reason for that. Those two guys, a massive reason for that. All right, well, we'll get to that in just a second. Let's recap. Make sure we're on the same page from the Gamecock perspective. Yes, sir, Big Spur. I hear you. That was oh man, I told you guys it was the most South Carolina story ever when I read it. I mean, that's just all I could think, right? The original owners had the trademark on it, the contract with the university. It was running out. They had basically bequeathed the live mascot. It's a lot of work to make that happen, to get the live mascot to the sidelines of every football game, like just physically doing that, handling Sir Big Spur, which had become a tradition for Gamecock football for a while, right? Live mascots are great in college football. It's part of the pageantry, right? Ugga, Ralphie, Bevo, go across the country. If you're a big-time college football program, you don't have a live mascot, what are you doing? And if you're a big-time college football program and your live mascot is an eagle and you're the Tigers, what are you doing, Auburn? There's the SEC shorts about that, I think. No, I saw just a random video on that. I don't know. There's a comedian out there or somebody who does social media videos. It's pretty good. I don't know what's going on there. But again, part of the beauty of college football. Doesn't make sense all the time. Life doesn't make sense all the time. Embrace it. Or just be bitter. Your choice. So the contract was running out. The new owners, they didn't think it was humane, I guess. I don't know. I'm not, this is the first time I ever heard of a comb on top of a rooster's head being what helps cool the animal. And the previous owners said no. Gamecocks actually, if they were getting into a cockfight, I think would never have that because it would be a disadvantage in the fight. So they cut that thing off. And then the new owner said, no, that's how the animal stays cool. And so it was a thing. And it became a thing nationally about this. I think people just kind of laughed and said, college football is crazy. South Carolina people are nuts. What is going on? And so he had to come up with a new nickname. And then that got the whole Cock Commander story out there from the Daily Gamecock in 2004. A joke caption ended up getting printed, had kind of this cult following kind of deal, pops up on social media. New York Post picks up the story. South Carolina football is being talked about because of the live mascot and the whole thing. They don't go that way. They don't go Darius Clucker. August is rough for us, okay? It's rough it's great in a lot of ways in that college football's closer, and it's really rough in a lot of ways because it's so close, and yet we got nothing to go off of. I mean, we got head coaches talking once every week if we're lucky, seeing absolute no action from closed practices. So that just kind of fed the beast. It allowed people to talk about something. So the general becomes the very generic mascot name, since Sir Big Spur is not an option because of legalities of a rooster's name was boggled my mind and made me angry to even talk about it. And then apparently the athletics department at the University of South Carolina got enough negative feedback to bring the two parties together, former owners, current owners, and come to some sort of agreement to allow the name to be Sir Big Spur yet again. The most ridiculous thing I've ever talked about professionally into a microphone in my life. Oh. But that's what it is. And now we can move on, I hope. Nick says that whole ordeal with Sir Big Spur was like one of those trash reality shows my wife watches. I'm with you, man. It is a weak era we're living in, Nick DC says. Nick, you're calling Southern Charm trash? You're right. My guilty pleasure. Wow. Man. Yeah, Cluck Norris. Yep, you're talking about that, John, last night. Come on. Could this be? Now, if this was brilliant. If Eric Nichols over at the University of South Carolina, who's in charge of marketing, or Ray Tanner, or some Justin Kings seems to be the main genius that we talk about for the most part. Actually, just saw a story from David Cloninger, the Post-Courier, about Under the Carolina Sky and how my buddy Justin Stoll, I had no idea. Justin is married to a former producer over at WOLO, Emily. She's a big-time Browns fan, a great coworker for several years, had one of the worst jobs in the history of jobs, being an overnight producer. So her schedule was to come in at like 11 o'clock at night and stay until 8 the next morning. But Justin would come and every now and again hang out in the office, and I didn't realize that he wrote the script for Under the Carolina Sky, that great, one of the best preview videos that you can get going into a game. It leads right into 2001 and how he wrote it, kind of unfamiliar with all Gamecock tradition in a lot of ways, coming from the state of Ohio. And then it was Andy Demetra that helped him shape that thing exactly back in the day to have the voice of like the stadium. It was a really cool article, Post-Courier. I recommend you check that out if you get a chance today. But those just popped in my mind, because if this was a marketing strategy to get people talking about South Carolina football, brilliant. And yet, I guess it would be one of those no PR is bad PR kind of things, because I think a lot of people just snickered about it around the country, like, that South Carolina stuff, it's nuts. Can you believe that? The Gamecocks. John says the Clarks are really good people. Those are the former owners, the original owners, I'm guessing. Oh, yeah, Dr. Pecker was a possibility, Roger. Good point. So, could not be happier that is, we're through that period. Other Gamecock news you need to know today: the Cleveland Guardians, which is hard for me to even say out there, have called up former Gamecock pitcher Cody Morris. Morris now thrust right into the pennant race. Cleveland's up a game and a half, I think, in the AL Central. Cody Morris, if you're thinking, wait a second, I'm a Gamecock baseball fan, I don't even really hardly remember him. Well, he's a lot like Spencer Strider for Clemson. A career 5-3 record's what Strider had. Let me look up that career record. I think it's like 3-2. Cody Morris only pitched for 2 years. Let's get that Gamecock record. Yeah, 3-2 career record for Carolina. Actually, sorry, that was just in 2017. Then he went 9-3 that next year. Really kind of became the ace, and quietly did throw 83 innings in 2018. So he was just there for 2 seasons. Helped Carolina get to that super regional back in 2018. But now is moving on to Major League Baseball. 57th Gamecock to do it. 2nd this year to make Major League debut. Jonah Bride did it a little bit earlier this year. So wanted to make sure you guys knew about that. Cleveland battling the Minnesota Twins there in the AL Central right now. Last night at Stone Stadium, Carolina-Clemson, women's soccer. Clemson had the 1-0 lead and 2-1 lead. Carolina came back to tie it and end up in a 2-2 tie. I guess there is no overtime now in college soccer. I think I heard that right. No overtimes in regular season college soccer anymore. So that one ends in a tie. The men's matchup is tonight, and it flips, right? USC women, one of the best programs in the country, number 4 going into this thing. The Clemson men, one of the best programs in the country. So that's kind of a win for the Clemson women last night. We'll see if the Gamecock men can kind of even that thing out, as the Palmetto Series is off and rolling after Carolina-Clemson in action in soccer last night. We'll do it again tonight on the men's side. All right, you guys jump right into the biggest preseason myths, so I want to get some of your thoughts there. We'll start there, then we'll go in reverse and make sure you're caught up on last night's college football, which was fantastic. Tremendous. And the Clarks are the new owners. My apologies. I'm not all in on this. John's looking for Stuart Lake's rant. It's on YouTube. What I think I labeled that something like team culture and the biggest difference between Will Muschamp and Shane Beamer. You can find it. There's a playlist on the YouTube channel, by the way, of just segments of the show. If you ever just want some smaller pieces and want to roll through those, maybe you want to catch up, make sure that you saw everything. Biggest myth, Daddy-O says. college football is that this is your granddaddy's Carolina. Okay. DC says, my prediction for tomorrow is we're going to kill him. Good stuff. Chris, biggest myth early is that Rattler is not a top 30 quarterback. So you're talking in the country, and I haven't seen that a bunch. I've seen that a couple of different places. I guess that one, I forget which preseason award it was, maybe Unitas or Davey O'Brien or one of the many top quarterbacks in the country list. Spencer Rattler did not make. It's wild to me. It's one of the best places to start. Wild to me to see the variance in preseason projections for Spencer Rattler. It is one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, like top 2 or 3, which means you're one of the best players in the country. Or it's not one of the top 30 quarterbacks in the country, which, I mean, that variance is massive. It's very similar to me to the conversation around DJU, which has turned into, I think, from a lot of people, he will be replaced by Klubnik there this year. It's going to happen. Clemson will make the move, and DJU, a lot like Kelly Bryant, will be out at some point this year. It's either that or nope. He's one of the most talented guys they've had. He's just like the previous 2 quarterbacks and Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson. He's going to get it back. Last year was an anomaly. He's improved so much, worked so hard, all that. Both quarterbacks in the state of South Carolina. A fascinating story for completely different reasons, but national stories this year. That's rarely the case that both quarterbacks in the state of South Carolina, I mean, throw Grayson McCall in there too. He's a national story. He's the most proven guy in the state. Savell Newton, former Gamecock star in so many ways. He's going to join us in about 30 minutes. He's set to join us at 9 o'clock today, and he likes to point out that he puts Grayson McCall ahead of both of Spencer Rattler and DJU. If you're ranking quarterbacks in the state of South Carolina, he's just proven most. He's proven the most, and there's no doubt about it. He has. RL, biggest myth is that the fan base thinks the Gamecocks will win 9 or more games. The average fan, somewhere between 6 and 8. So what RL is saying, it took me a second to get there, is that most fans right now, you can get the perception if you talk to people. Rick Sanford and I were having this conversation. He was saying, whoa, easy on the expectations out there. So RL saying that you can get the perception that most Gamecock fans are thinking 9 or more wins this season. I agree with you, RL. That is a myth. I think most Gamecock fans, now they might say that. They might come out like Tommy and say 10-2. Absolutely. Or even if, like Daddy-O says, that this is your granddaddy's Carolina, I think even, and you can answer for yourself there, but the projection for the season still probably not 9-3, right? I mean, if you had to put your money on it, I don't think you would go 9-3 or better. I don't think most Gamecock fans would. I'm with you, RL. Biggest preseason myth that Bryce Young wins the Heisman again. They don't like to vote for the same guy 2 years in a row, even if he deserves it on the Tonester. Good point. It has not happened in forever. Back-to-back Heisman trophies. All right, I think that's a good place. Adam, I hope we win tomorrow. Adam, I think a lot of Gamecock fans are with you. DJU might be in the transfer portal by Halloween, Daddy-O says. Hope, good morning to you. Welcome in. Happy game day eve. Hope you're feeling enthusiastic, optimistic, energetic. If you can't feel that the day before college football season kicks off, it's tough for me to understand where you're coming from. And I get it. If you're saying, whoa, it already happened last night. This is part of the reason why I am feeling all of that, because of the epic game that was the national headliner on ESPN last night. My buddy Matt Berry was on the call in Pittsburgh. First time in 11 years, West Virginia and Pitt didn't realize they're just 75 miles apart, the campuses. It had everything you need. It was college football. It was the biggest crowd in the history of Pittsburgh sports, 70+ thousand. And then, that irks me. All the college football nerds out there, all the expansion is going to ruin the sport purists out there saying, well, it seems like a good idea to keep regional rivalries alive. Yes, of course. But when you're comparing 70+ thousand people in person to 700+ thousand TV viewers and what the value is there, you got to understand those are, you can't have it both ways, right? I want it. I want the regional rivalries. Don't get me wrong, but you also gotta make sense financially for these big time programs that are just million towards $billion operations. But man, I was pulling hard for West Virginia. Former neighbor of mine's big West Virginia fan. Talking to him through the years, to me it is very similar to the South Carolina experience, I think, following the Gamecocks through decades. West Virginia very much in the same I think in the same bracket, let's say in the same tax bracket of college football as South Carolina's been through the years. Now you can say the SEC is in a different category. I get that. But that CarQuest Bowl back in the day, I got to see West Virginia fans. I think if you're a West Virginia fan, let's say this, you have my respect in the college football world. There are a bunch of fans out there that don't. Michigan fans are kind of famously fair weather fans. Ohio State, how hard is it to be an Ohio State fan when you've been as dominant as you are? Clemson the same way here recently. Now, if you're a Clemson fan pre-Dabo, that's a different deal. But still, ACC championships and the whole thing. If you're like a Wake Forest football fan, God bless you. Vandy, bless your heart in the SEC. Florida fans, how easy is that, right? Texas A&M fans, that's a fun one. Texas fans on the opposite end, just kind of looking down at everybody, despite not having won much of anything recently. You can throw Pitt fans in there too. Like Pitt, kind of irrelevant in their own town with the Steelers, which has got to be tough. But West Virginia, man, a college football state, and just Major Harris back in the day was massive. That great year playing for a national title against Notre Dame. That was fantastic. Great run. That's kind of how I came to West Virginia. But then, kind of a history of a little bit better than average, right? Every now and again, nationally relevant. Last night, a fantastic game. In so many ways, that freshman running back was tremendous for West Virginia. Electric, the big plays all over the place. Yeah, Matt was fantastic in the booth. I know my West Virginia buddy was not pleased to have a Pitt alum and Lewis Riddick doing the color analysis. And I saw Corey Miller put up on social media that the homer was pretty strong. Oh, nice, Daddy-O. My buddy here in South Carolina drove up to Pittsburgh. You better check on him this morning. Yeah, good for him. Troy's got 3 thoughts for us. Let's go. He says, Penn State and Purdue was a great game. Pitt and West Virginia was even better. Agreed. There was about 500 reviews in that Pitt-West Virginia game, but I think they were all needed, and they got them right. Yeah, my buddy, he was mad about the officiating, especially that last call. I wanted that catch to happen so much because when it happened, when the attempt happened, it was 4th down, final seconds, 4th and significant, right? I forget what it was. I think it was double digits. I think it was 11. I don't know. Was it 19? Whatever it was. It was going to be difficult for West Virginia to pick up, to convert. And how Keaton Slovis even saw, or JT Daniels, sorry, how JT Daniels even saw the opportunity to put that ball up there. And then his receiver, it seemed like it was up there forever. It was one of those, right? Like the rookie of the year Ephus pitch. It seemed like it was up there forever. And the West Virginia receiver comes sliding under it. And in real time, I thought he miraculously made that catch. And then, unfortunately, you see the replay, and clearly the ball wobbles on the ground, and you can't call that a completion. It's just not. But from the West Virginia fan base's perspective, I get it. You saw something very similar with the Pitt tight end earlier in the game. The difference, I think, was he kept two hands on the ball, and it didn't wobble as much. I think it did give a little wobble, and they said, was it Matt Austin is their officiating guy, who basically was the third person in the broadcast with all those reviews last night, said he thought it was going to be incomplete, and they didn't. It was one of those where it wasn't 50-50 to me. To me, I agreed. I thought it should have been incomplete, but apparently the standard for overturning it was a little higher by that replay official than it was for others, and that's where it gets ridiculous. John is not a fan of Matt Austin's. Biggest myth is that he's a rules expert. All right. Yeah, Nick, being a dedicated Gamecock fan is hard life. I think the same with West Virginia. Good point, DC. Yeah, Florida State fans, I should have mentioned them earlier. So spoiled. As a Texas fan, John says, I'm glad to see Texas get knocked down some notches when they need to be humbled. That's interesting. Well, John's an interesting Texas/Gamecock fan. Roger says, got a friend at work, since retired, originally from the Pittsburgh area, talked about the Steelers incessantly, was a Pitt Panther fan, but hardly mentioned them. Yeah, that's the thing about Pitt in college. Unless it's Dan Marino's there back in the day. It is definitely a pro sports town. The opposite of West Virginia, right? But that backyard brawl's got some nastiness to it in a lot of ways. In a college football fun way, I think most of the time. Hopefully most of the time. Interesting. Eric B weighing in. Says this Gamecock team reminds me of Spurrier's first few years where the teams were more competitive, but the record doesn't show it. 7-5 and 6-6 likely. I think that's a fair assessment at this point. DC's in on that one. The Tonester, I agree with DC's comment. Next door neighbor's a big Florida State fan. He's having a tough time in light of their recent mediocrity. Oh, Daddy-O, good point. I forgot to mention that with Matt Austin. You ever heard him talk about the loudest stadium he's ever officiated in? Just did that with Alyssa Lang on the SEC Network. It was about a week ago. And I got retweeted by Gamecock social media real quick, talking about Williams-Brice Stadium being the loudest stadium that he's ever officiated in. Yeah, the great Tony Dorsett, meant to mention him as a Pitt Panther, former Pitt Panther. They should play every year, Troy. I'm with you. And I forget who was it. It was David Hamilton, a guy that I rubbed shoulders with in the TV career back in the day. He's done some reporting and nationally, college football-wise. But he put it out on social media yesterday that this not only should they play every year, but it should be the college football season opener every year. I would have no problem with that, man. To me, it's what college football is. It's not always about the blue bloods. They certainly have their place. The perennial powerhouses, those four teams that are predicted to be in the college football playoff by most people this year, right? Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and Clemson. They have been the upper echelon in college football for the last, decade-ish. Some longer, some shorter. Some, I guess, who else would you be yelling about? Notre Dame fans probably got their feelings hurt on that one. Sorry. Get over it. But I agree they should play every year. No doubt about that. But I would have no problem if they were the Thursday night season opener. If we could count on that every year, I'm good with that. Just like Clemson and Georgia should play every year, Troy says. It's a little different because Clemson and Georgia are so far up there, right? Pitt and West Virginia aren't that, and that's part of the beauty of last night. It didn't have all the hype of all of that, all the national implications. If West Virginia won that game last night, their season instantly took a jump, right? But I think you can still be pretty encouraged from the West Virginia standpoint with what you saw now, or you're a lot like Nebraska saying, "Oh, that's who Neil Brown is." You had a chance to go for it late in the game there in the fourth quarter, right around midfield, 4th and short. You decided to punt. Ugh. That's rough, man. That's rough. So I feel for West Virginia fans this morning. I loved everything about that game last night. I mean, it's everything that college football is, right? Everything that college football is right now. That you can get still record-setting crowds. That you can have a regional rivalry. But it does take 11 years sometimes to play them. You can be right on the cusp of being nationally relevant and then have a guy who's made plays all night, have it go through his hands right into the other opponent's hands for a pick six, and that turns out to be the play of the game. Ooh, so rough, man. Regional games releasing decades of hatred do make for the best game environments. Well put, Daddy-O. Oh, so tough. So Pitt winning. Yes, and I'm going to call it an epic backyard brawl. If you want to say I have recency bias, go right ahead. It was a tremendous game. A really good game, too. Penn State and Purdue. Really good game. And I kind of liked it. It's amazing to me as well, just because it's the Big Ten and it's Fox and it's not ESPN. I feel like it gets talked about so much less nationally. And maybe because there's not the novelty of playing for the first time in 11 years, like the backyard brawl. There wasn't a conference champion involved here. Pitt did win the ACC last year. West Virginia is kind of in college football purgatory in a lot of ways with the conference expansion discussions. The fact that they're a Big 12 team really weirds me out. And Pitt even being in the ACC. My wife is a Florida State grad. She's like, Pitt's in the ACC? It's weird. Penn State and Purdue, not exactly a classic Big Ten matchup either. But Purdue, especially having seen that upset against Ohio State a couple of years ago, Rondale Moore, having played for them, being so exciting in the last several years, but pretty mediocre. I have another family member that's a Purdue grad, so I get the boiler up chance every now and again. Pull for them. They're easy for me to pull for these days. Drew Brees, great football ambassador, impossible not to like, I think, in a lot of ways. And Sean Clifford, I saw on social media, apologize that I don't remember who it was exactly, make the comparison. I think it's a great one. Let me take a dramatic swig of coffee first before the comparison, the Sean Clifford comparison. I'm guessing you might know who it would be if you're a Gamecock fan. Just think about it for a second. He's 24 years old, by the way. Sixth-year senior. I saw the comparison, Sean Clifford, Penn State, to Jake Bentley at South Carolina. I think it's dead on, except for that game-winning drive last night, maybe. You didn't see a lot of those moments for Jake Bentley in clutch time coming up as big as Sean Clifford did last night. But a guy who has just been there seemingly forever. I mean, Jake Bentley went to two other programs after being at South Carolina, right? Utah starting quarterback and finished up at South Alabama. Seemed like he was in college forever. That's what happens when you even reclassify. He could have been a senior in high school and end up being the face of the program halfway through the year and becoming a big storyline. Sean Clifford has been that guy for Penn State, but has never been the guy that take the next step. And had Penn State lost last night, had that last drive not happened, whew, man, Sean Clifford would have had a rough day today. Instead, gets redemption, comes up big. It was a great game to watch. I was disappointed that Penn State, pulling for the upset. Always an upset guy in these kind of non-stake games where I don't have a stake one way or the other. The fact that Penn State is not nationally relevant in the preseason is very interesting to me. With the whole James Franklin experiment up there or environment has been an interesting one, especially seeing him come from Vanderbilt and what he did with that program, his personality. So surprised that Penn State hasn't been able to get to that next step. It just shows to me how difficult it is with all the tradition they have, all the fan support. The whiteout is amazing. But they haven't been able to get to that next level. That's where Tennessee, Mizzou, Wake Forest, I guess you could argue Wake Forest has with the ACC championship game appearance. But no problem for any of those guys last night. Tennessee, the most impressive in my mind. Hendon Hooker. I think this is the main concern for Gamecock fans. Mizzou struggled to even get the lead against Louisiana Tech early, and they did enough to be pretty impressive. If you have to choose between those two, I think Tennessee is the much bigger problem, but they're both problems for the Gamecock football program right now. Wake Forest is a problem for Clemson football in the ACC, which is a sentence I never thought I would say, especially after multiple national championships for Clemson. But if Sam Hartman gets back, especially, even without him, they didn't have a problem. All three of these teams, they're similar to me in that they are offensively led. They are what college football is in a lot of ways as we sit here on September 2nd, 2022, in that if you don't score points, it's tough to have a bunch of success in college football in 2022. If you don't have a dynamic offense, I should say, to be less elementary. Well, of course, if you don't score points, you're not going to win games, dummy. Brilliant statement by me. If you don't have a dynamic offense, an explosive offense that relatively consistently can get to the 40s or 50s, especially in mismatch games or games where you're favored, heavily favored, then you're pretty irrelevant in college football in 2022. These three programs, to varying degrees, right? You got to put Wake first. Sorry, Tennessee fans. They've just done more recently. Tennessee is definitely next. They went from like 103rd in total offense to 7 last year, something crazy like that. And Hendon Hooker is really, really good. And then you got Mizzou, Eli Drinkwitz, with his offensive reputation, what he did at App State. It's not to the level, certainly, that he would like it. It's not to Tennessee's level. It's not to Wake's level. But it's still a problem. They still beat South Carolina last year. It's still going to be an issue, I think, in a lot of ways, like Kentucky, right? South Carolina fans are still wanting to look down at Kentucky and Missouri. And to me, that's what 2022 is in a lot of ways for South Carolina. If you can finish above Kentucky and Missouri in the SEC, you have taken a next step in the Shane Beamer era. If you can't, then it's a kind of a matter of opinion in a lot of ways about the trajectory of this thing after the big time first season. Other South Carolina implications last night, just notable. Central Florida, no problem against South Carolina State. Did you guys see it? I retweeted it. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It is, I don't even know how to describe it. It's fascinating to watch, and you got to do it multiple times. 4th and 19, I think it was. Fake punt. I think it was around the 20 or 30 in their own territory. The SC State punter, it looks like it's going to be a good play. Significant yardage. Gets about 4 yards short of the sticks. Looks like he might end up getting tackled short of it and just decides to punt it. 15 yards down past the line of scrimmage. I've never seen an illegal forward punt. I've never seen that in my life. Never even seen one get close. It's always, we saw the block punt in the West Virginia Pitt game last night where the rugby style deal it was a little too long and West Virginia took advantage. Seen that happen a bunch. Typically, punters in that situation, if they get pressured, they'll spaz and pull it, right? The ACC championship one with Clemson when Dabo Swinney in that punter's face was the best example, the one that pops in my head the most significantly. I've never seen anything like that last night. First of all, it looked like a pretty dynamic runner as the punter. It didn't look like he was running it as a punter. It looked like he might get loose and really go. And then just, it was like an Australian rules football moment or something. It seemed just the announcers were just confused, as they should have been. Players seemed a little bit confused as well, as they should have been. It was wild. It was nuts, man. With that game going about how you would assume it goes. Now South Carolina State gets to get back to their real season in a lot of ways. The defending HBCU champs. I think they got $450,000 for that game. Good for them. Citadel, tough loss for them. Campbell should not be the Citadel from the Citadel perspective, 29-10. That one on the road. Furman, impressive in their opener against North Greenville, but those are different divisions, so they should have been. But 52-0, still quite the season opener. So those are the South Carolina direct implications of a Thursday night worth remembering. Troy back to Clemson and Georgia in the 80s, one of the biggest rivalry games in the country. Bigger to some Clemson fans than South Carolina. Oh, now he's just trying to get Gamecock fans going. Good for you, Troy. It's the Friday before football season. I got no problem with that. Tennessee game was good until the first play of scrimmage. It was Jalen Hyatt scoring the first touchdown, I think, former Dutch Fork product. They got another one up there in Antonio Williams as a receiver for Tennessee. Those could stick in Gamecock fans' craws for sure if they continue to play well. Jason said, watch a lot of football. Some of SC State, Citadel, even Limestone. Oh, I got to get a Limestone score. My apologies, Jason. Pitt game was entertaining. Yeah, it was fantastic. DC's always pulling for the underdog with you. Daddy, what was the SC State punter even thinking? Buddy Pugh looked too shook up to even say anything to him. Well, that's one of those great things about college football. Sometimes it just happens, right? I don't know. How could you? Like, Buddy Pugh has coached a bunch of football, right? Really made his reputation winning state championships as a high school coach, Fairfield Central. Then gets on Lou Holtz's staff at South Carolina. Parlays that into the head coaching job at his alma mater, SC State. And I think he might be the all-time winningest coach there. My apologies to Willie Jeffries if he's not, but I was thinking he was. And then now it's been weird the last few years where they tried to get him out. And he's hung on, and now the athletic director's out there at SC State. But yeah, what do you tell a guy who runs 15 yards past the line of scrimmage and then punts it? What do you tell that guy? Like I coached 9 and 7-year-old, my 9 and 7-year-old in flag football. If they did, fortunately, we don't have to punt, but if when they go even a yard or two past the line of scrimmage to throw it, I'm like, come on, man, you know the rule. You can't do that. That's one of the only flags they throw in flag football. The only penalties. That one, yeah. All right, let's see what Nick's getting out here. If we don't beat Kentucky this year, I'm taking the Stoops approach and acting like it never occurred. I'm expecting possible multiple suspensions. Coach, what about those suspensions? I didn't say suspensions. You said suspension. Huh? We didn't lose to Kentucky. You lost to Kentucky. Fair enough. That'll be immediately after the game ends in true Stoops fashion, Nick says. Good for you. You know, a lot of people do that approach and act like it never occurred. That's because they can't remember some of those games, I think. Sometimes that happens. I have seen that happen at Williams-Brice Stadium every now and again. I don't know about you guys. Troy says, I've seen a lot of illegal forward passes in my day, but I can't remember ever seeing an illegal forward punt. Agreed. And, yeah, Roger, that was the thing. He could have had the first down, and possibly. If I had to put money on it, I'd say he would not have. I'm not putting money on the punter getting that extra yardage with the extra effort at the very end, but it would have been really close. My fault. Antonio Williams is at Clemson. I don't know what I was thinking there. Good point, Dustin. Thanks for keeping me straight. That's part of the reasons why I love the live chat. I was just thinking of Dutch Fork guys going to big-time programs wearing orange. My mistake about Jalen Hyatt being at Tennessee, Antonio Williams now being at Clemson. Did you give your score prediction at the end of the show? Or do you give it at the end of the show? No, we don't have to go all the way. We don't have to be that dramatic, right? You're looking forward to that. So, all right, that's a good transition, Kens, into where we're going now. Gamecock specifically. What do you guys have? I saw 31-13 or 31-10, I think, earlier. Gamecocks. What are you guys thinking? I would like to get more of yours. That's not going to change mine. But that's one of the things that really irks me about anyone who has a microphone in front of their face from the sports talk perspective is that it can be all about them sometimes. That is not how I prefer to to interact with you guys. I am fascinated by all the different perspectives, and what I love, maybe it's just like the thought process that gets me really interested in, like, how did you get there? Right? A lot of like that 10-2 prediction from Jeremy earlier. Okay, I can see it. But man, that is a lot of optimism. Good for you, thinking you're gonna get there, because those 4 games I've got the Carolina. Let me go season at large before I get you the prediction. And sorry if you're saying, I heard this like 3 times, but it's a long off season, okay? And I'm just trying to be clear with where I'm coming from, looking at this Carolina game. And several of you already weighing in. Thank you. Eric, 34-20, Carolina. Kens, yep, 31-13. Could see it close at halftime. Very fair. 34-17, another really fair one. Yeah, Bryce Thompson was another Dutch Fork and Tennessee guy. Yeah, but that one was really weird, right? Was committed to Carolina. Some stuff happened. Let him get off to Tennessee. Really good player at Tennessee, and then left early, didn't get drafted. I don't know. I don't think he's in pro football anywhere. Strange. Nick says, I think we cover the spread, and he went 34-17. So I got the season at large for the Gamecocks separated into thirds, right? 3 different categories, 12 games, 4 games each. 4 games you got to win. Tomorrow night's game at the top of the list. The other 2 non-conference games that aren't Clemson there as well, South Carolina State and Charlotte, and then Vanderbilt. Got to win those games. Floor should be 4, right? I'm not saying it's outside of the realm of possibility that Carolina loses one of those games. I'm just saying those are the games you look on paper, you got to win those games in your South Carolina football, especially coming off 7-5, doing math. The talent that you have versus the talent that they have, you should win those games. Those are kind of, you can play less than A games and you still should win. That's how I see that. Then you got 4 in the middle that I think the talent is very similar. I think Carolina might be the underdog in 3 out of the 4, but the spread is going to be within a touchdown, I think, in a lot of these games. I don't think it's going to be double-digit spread. Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Florida. Those are the 4 in the middle. And then the 4 that are probably going to be double-digit underdogs. And I think Florida was like a 19-point favorite last year, so it certainly doesn't mean you can't win them, but likely to lose. Big-time underdogs. Clemson, Texas A&M, Georgia, and Arkansas. That's how I see the season. Man, Chris is going 42-17 in the opener against Georgia State. Impressive. Troy goes 35-23, and I'm right there with Troy. Troy and I, even though he's our resident Clemson fan, we seem to be on the same page a lot of times. And so this one would be a close cover for Georgia State, right? 31-13 would be an easy cover for Carolina, with the spread being 11.5, 12.5, somewhere in there. Depends on where you're looking, I think, recently. And I think those numbers are pretty spot on. I think it's going to be somewhere low 30s for Carolina, somewhere in between that 13 to 24 range. 38-13, Josh says, pretty comfortable win for Carolina in this thing. I'm going to be surprised if it's a comfortable win. That's best case scenario. I mean, if it's a blowout win, it's a absolute home run in the opener, right? You feel really good about the season. If it's a comfortable win, I still think you're feeling pretty good about the season. If it's one of those where you don't cover the spread, and you're getting real antsy real quick, and I think those 10-2, any kind of 10-2 prediction or best case scenario thing kind of goes out the window real quick. But what I'm anticipating to see tomorrow from Carolina is, that was dramatic, wasn't it? Sorry for the drama there. That was just too much coffee. Need a little water. I'm going to go 31-20 as my prediction. Didn't want to steal anybody else's exactly. Still an 11-point deal, so that would be a cover for Georgia State, actually. So this the 12, if you get it at 11.5, that would be a cover, I guess, for Carolina, what Troy has. So 31-20, I think, and that could be a late score from Georgia State is kind of how I'm seeing it. I see close game early. Carolina gets a decent enough lead to feel pretty good about things at half. I'm thinking like 17-7, right? And then Carolina could even extend that in the second half to make it more comfortable, 24-7. You get a couple of probably a touchdown, Georgia State to make it a little bit more uncomfortable, another touchdown for Carolina to feel really good, and then Georgia State maybe gets a late score against more second teamers, covers the spread, and yet I think Carolina fans could still feel okay about that. Remember, you don't want to play your best game here. You only get so many. What was that? The great Pat Monteith, the national champion baseball player at North Greenville, told us going into the final game of the season, and he was saying it kind of all College World Series long. The way he thinks about things is you typically don't get a great game and then another great game. And it's so true. I mean, baseball is completely different because you play so many, but college football, we see it all the time, right? Very rarely in a season do you get a team operating on the same really high level 12 games in a row. That is what, in my mind, has separated those top four programs that are favored to be in the college football playoff this year. That's why Oklahoma is not quite there anymore, and really has been an anomaly for the top programs. I think it's why it's 5th or 6th right now. But and Clemson's last year, the anomaly for sure in this. Clemson has done that by and large in the last decade. Georgia now has become that under Kirby Smart, seemingly. Alabama has always been that, even though last year you can pick that apart a little bit, right? Florida, Auburn, serious threats. And then who am I leaving out? Ohio State, right? And there are some exceptions, that game at Purdue especially. Adam, that might be the best prediction. I better not lose my mind tomorrow. If we somehow lose, I'll be on here for sure yelling LOL. Good for you with the LOL, Adam. I'm glad you can take a little bit of levity in it, knowing that we're in college football season now and could not be happier about it. And last night, again, fantastic. So how about this? We were talking about Spencer Rattler and that all over the place. Why don't you guys tell me what you're expecting from Rattler specifically, numbers-wise, or if you want to go more generic than that, I got no problem. While you're thinking about that, I'll let you hear kind of the best of Spencer Rattler's weekly press conference heading into this thing. Again, massively notable because it's his first game as a Gamecock, everything that went down last year. First season opener as a non-Oklahoma quarterback, non-Lincoln Riley offense. How is it going to look? How is the Marcus Satterfield offense going to look with him leading the way? All of those things go into this. So we'll do that, kind of reset as we've gone through an hour already, rolling into hour number 2, still looking for former Gamecock legend, not a former legend, Gamecock legend, Savell Newton to join us this morning as well. Here's Spencer Rattler from earlier in the week, best of some of his comments leading up to tomorrow night's season opener, his Gamecock career opener against Georgia State.
I mean, we all get on a clean little suit, get to go out there, look good. Hopefully we play good because we look good.
What are you most excited about now getting in front of the South Carolina fans for the first time?
Exactly that. I'm just excited to see all the fans out there. Hear 2001 play, Sandstorm, all that. I'm excited for it. Running out that tunnel with my team, with the coaches, everything. And, hopefully get the anxiety out the way, anxious anxiety, just fun, ready to go vibes. Not nervous, but just excited, if you know what I mean. But it's going to be fun.
Spencer, what certain tone or message do you guys hope to set in game 1?
We just want to go out there and execute on every level and dominate. That's what we want to do. We want to go out there and not react, but do what we do and get into them. So that's the plan. we're just going to execute every play and play as good as we can. You know, you got to keep the same mindset, which is attack. Just being here is a blessing with this team. You know, camp was great. Spring ball was great. Fall camp was great. So I feel like we're prepared, and we got a few more days of work, like I said, and we're just excited to play, excited to get out there. It's refreshing for sure.
Dominate. Attack. That's what stands out to me. Spencer Rattler's played the game. He's been in the game a long time from a media standpoint, so he didn't go Juice Wells on us. I'm sorry, what did Juice Wells say again?
I ain't gonna lie, he's just gonna go out there and kill him. You know, it's not too much to it. He's just gonna go out there and ball. He's just gonna go out there and kill him. Kill him.
Sorry, it just makes me smile every time. I think they have the exact same mindset, by the way. And I think that should be every single college football player's mindset. It's just how you express it in this little game that we have with a microphone and a podium and a backdrop and everyone trying to be respectful and the whole thing, right? So what I heard from Spencer Rattler is confident. I heard polished, pretty mature way of handling and talking about it and the whole thing. A little less so from Juice Wells, no doubt. But I think when I hear dominate, I hear attack. I hear we want to go out there and kill them. That's how I translate it. All right, let's hear it. Let's see. Okay, we got some numbers from Josh. This is what I'm talking about, Josh. Well done. 18 out of 25 for 254 yards, a couple of touchdowns, and one pick. I'm right there with you, Joshua. I'd probably go about 20 yards less, maybe 25 yards less, somewhere in the 220 to 230-ish range. But that's almost exact, a pretty high completion percentage, higher than we're used to seeing from the Gamecock perspective. That spring game, I felt like there were a lot of checkdowns, a lot of quick reads and getting the ball out. And Carolina needs that. I know that they don't have the proven playmakers that Oklahoma's offense has had. So I don't think you're going to see that translate into a bunch of explosive plays, but I think there'll be a couple. And I think that's what this offense needs for sure. Spencer Rattler, to me, has shown the propensity to put the ball up for grabs every now and again. And I'll be surprised if he doesn't throw a pick in this game, because even he was talking about it. He was asked about it. What's the line between attack, and protecting the football? That's what everyone is going to be looking at Spencer Rattler for in this game, right? Confidence versus cockiness. Smart decisions versus sometimes you just got to let it go, right? Taking shots. You got to take your shots. Whoa, big prediction from Daddy-O there. 42-17. He says, I've seen too many smirks from this team to not believe this season is going to be fun. Oh, then you've worked through more Will Muschamp era baggage than I have, I think. Because when I hear that, I just think, you're going to buy a ticket? The Jake Bentley season opener against North Carolina, where Sam Howell ends up coming back, and clearly Carolina was in position in the game and let it get away. In position to win the game. Nick says, passing game-wise, I'm expecting some screens, crossing routes with a few play-action deep balls. I think the run game will be the focus. I see Rattler going 16 out of 20 for about 260 yards. So very similar to 18 out of 25 for 254. So I think we're all a similar mindset there. If you have a massively different prediction or expectation for Spencer Rattler in game number 1, would love to hear it. Because I think those are very reasonable. What do you think will be the most significant stat of the game? I think that's exactly what Nick was talking about. Nick hit on it. He hit on it for me. Rush yards for South Carolina, to me. And I think I'd labeled yesterday's segment with Mike Gillespie that I popped out on the YouTube channel. It's on the playlist of show segments as must run week 1. And that's what I've come to now after talking about things, thinking about things. From a season perspective, South Carolina can't run the football effectively against Georgia State. I'm going to be talking to you guys on Tuesday about how that offensive line, the conversation about the improvement and the experience and the potential, we're not seeing it. That's just a bunch of talk. Again, seen it through the years. That's talking about them in a bubble, in a vacuum. Like, yes, of course they're getting bigger and stronger and the whole thing, but they're not going up against other programs continuously during the offseason that are also doing the same thing. And when you put them together, we didn't see anything. If Marshawn Lloyd specifically doesn't get above 60-ish yards, I'd say maybe even more than that. If he doesn't get close to 100, I think it's going to be a failure in a lot of ways in game number 1. South Carolina should push Georgia State around. Now, it's not going to be complete dominance. This is not an Eastern Illinois, just like Shane Beamer said in his weekly press conference, who was very respectable against Northern Illinois last night, by the way. I think they lost by a touchdown. And fascinating to me that Georgia State's best offensive lineman, or the one talked about the most from Sean Elliott in his weekly press conference, is a transfer from Eastern Illinois. Weird, right? But they're not that. Georgia State won some bowl games, won a bunch of games. I think they ended their season with 4 straight wins last year. They blew out Troy, a Troy team that Carolina beat by 9 last year. They also got blown out by North Carolina, a team that North Carolina handled pretty easily in the bowl game. So you can see it in multiple ways, but ultimately, I think you have to see it as an ACC team. Sorry, I was thinking North Carolina in my head for some reason. An SEC team in South Carolina, an SEC program going up against a Sun Belt program. And 100 times out of 100, the SEC program should and does have better athletes across the board. Bigger, stronger, faster. And should every single time use that advantage to take control of the game. Now, it doesn't happen every single time. Georgia State, a good example, a couple of years ago, going to Tennessee last year, pushing Auburn to the brink. Like, that's why I think this is a great opener for the Gamecocks in 2022, year 2 of Shane Beamer. It's a test. It's not what last year's opener was when they needed it to be, right? You got a guy who was a grad assistant a few weeks beforehand being your starting quarterback in Zeb Nolan. You don't need a test in week 1. You need a win. And that's what they got. That's what happened last year. And then it would almost turned into a program soul-crushing kind of loss at East Carolina the next week. But fortunately, the Gamecocks survived and then turned their season into what they turned it into. If you can't assert your will and dominate the line of scrimmage against Georgia State, I don't see how you can compete against Arkansas. I don't see how you don't get blown out by the defending national champs in Georgia and close that gap like we've been talking about all offseason. To me, that is the mark of a successful season in year 2 for Shane Beamer. Close the gap that Gamecock fans have had to see in the last, 4 years now? Certainly 3 years. There has been a massive gap. I mean, you could go before then. You can go since 2013, really? Since Texas A&M came into Williams-Brice to open up the season that Thursday night and just was clearly on a different level with Kenny Hill, who looked like he was the greatest quarterback of all time that night. Oh, man. BW. Spencer will get benched in the game, and Luke Doty will come in to win it. Wow. That's an interesting prediction. So is Steven. Supremely confident with 45-10 Gamecocks. Chris is saying he thinks Rattler will throw for less than 200 yards because Carolina needs to run the football. I can certainly see that happening, right? But, I mean, if you see that and you're concerned, if it's 18 out of 20 for 195 and 3 touchdowns, that's a heck of a game, isn't it? I think every Carolina fan would take that right now. I mean, even 16 out of 20, 15 out of 20, somewhere in there. I think if those numbers stayed there, Spencer Rattler A+ in game 1, right? You get a really efficient game, a really productive offense that's led by the run game. To me, that's best case scenario. I think that's how you get 45-10. I don't think you get a blowout if Spencer Rattler is in those numbers that I threw out, or that some of you guys threw out as well, somewhere in the 15 out of 25 range for 250 yards. Because to me, that's showing that you couldn't run the football supremely effectively in a tremendously impactful way. And that would be a major concern, I think. And it's a major possibility, right? I mean, we've seen games like that. But last year, Troy game comes to my mind as a really good example of that. East Carolina, like, those are teams you should be able to push around, and Carolina didn't last year. And North Carolina on the opposite end, Florida on the opposite end, right? You got 2 100-plus yard rushers against Florida, and you can't do it against Troy and East Carolina. It makes no sense, but that's college football. And that's why I get it. If you think I'm overhyping things and putting too much emphasis on needing to run the football in week 1 and how it doesn't necessarily apply to every single game down the stretch or the rest of the way, you're right about that for sure. But I'm going to come to the conclusion, and it's going to have to be, no, you're going to have to convince me now. If you can't do it effectively against Georgia State, then I am skeptical the rest of the way about being able to run the football. So that's how I'm seeing tomorrow from the Carolina perspective. Love to hear more of your thoughts. And let's see if we need to hear from Marcus Satterfield on that, about the offense in general. No, I think we're good. We're good with Satterfield and what we heard. You know what we haven't heard right now, and what I thought was interesting, I think it's worth playing here, was the assistant coach's perceptions of some freshmen. And I think it goes into the mindset of this team and the opener specifically, being an SEC program and taking on a Georgia State, having a talent level advantage in this ball game. And these are a couple of guys I think that came in pretty far under the radar in South Carolina guys. DQ Smith at Spring Valley, who was a quarterback who's moved to safety. Nick Emenwari from over at Irmo, played mostly linebacker and has moved back to safety. And the coaches are talking them up. Let's start with Clayton White, and then we'll get to Pete Limbo. So Clayton White, the defensive coordinator, Pete Limbo, the special teams coordinator. Here's what they had to say on young guys, and especially those young safeties.
They put on a show this August. I'm just going to be honest with you. They really came to work. They came ready out of high school. And those guys, they put the work in from the summer, Zoom meetings, and they put it on the field. And they have physical makeups, and they have football IQ that you cannot coach. And, they're going to be really, really, really good football players. And I don't want to go too crazy, but they're still going to be freshmen. They're going to make a mistake. They're going to miss a tackle. They're going to hopefully not blow a coverage. But you guys are going to like them in the future, I promise you.
The trick of talking publicly at this stage, right, and being encouraging or encouraged by and praising players who deserve it, and yet not blowing them up, not putting too many expectations on them from a fan perspective or just a media public perception perspective. That's what I heard from Clayton White right there, who's not a guy that's necessarily going to just heap praise and try to hype anything up, as most defensive coordinators and football coaches in general. Pete Limbo, interesting take on the young players as well, now having seen all the preseason camp leading into the season opener tomorrow.
I will say this, we've got a great freshman class. And one thing that you are going to see on Saturday night is you're going to see some of our true freshmen out there playing on special teams. And it's not because we don't have anybody else. It's because they've earned it. We got some ballers in that freshman class. And I stand up here in front of you today, and I have total confidence in some of these guys to go out there and cut it loose because they're just wired that way. And they're engaged in my meetings. They're answering questions in my meetings. And they go out there and they can take what we've covered in the meeting and apply it on the field. And I just sit back and I'm like, this is awesome because this is what you want, right? These guys are hungry. And I mean, shoot, Nick Emamori gave a mini lecture on D-Day in one of my meetings the other day. He knew it was American, British, and Canadian forces, and that France was occupied by the Germans. Right there, he got himself on a unit.
You had to hear the whole press conference to understand a little bit more about where Limbo was going on that one. Being a history guy, history buff. But I don't think I put a lot of stock into what I just heard. Let me put it that way. Because Pete Limbo is a former head coach, right? Lower levels, Elon, most notably. Clayton White is not the most experienced defensive coordinator, right? First year in the SEC last year, Western Kentucky before that. But he's been around football plenty. And as has Pete Limbo. You don't talk about freshmen in this way at this stage unless your confidence and your trust level is really, really high, unless they have earned it, like those guys said. And I think that's a very encouraging sign for the program that, I mean, that's one of the separators, isn't it? Isn't that one of the main criticisms Gamecock football has had, that you could have of Gamecock football, I should say, in the last several years? I mean, that was one of, you can even go, you look at it the other way, right? Let's look at it the positive way. That was one of the main reasons why the Gamecocks were able to take that next step, to win an SEC East in 2010, to finish in the top 10 the next 3 years. Not only did they have supremely talented guys, Jadeveon Clowney, Stephon Gilmore, really highly touted guys that came in, Alshon Jeffrey, and were difference makers, but they also had guys that developed into really good players, DJ Swearinger, Melvin Ingram, Connor Shaw, Dylan Thompson. All those guys didn't come in with the hype. Nick Emmanwori didn't come in with any kind of national hype. DQ Smith, the same way. These are guys that you take a chance on to develop into a player because they have things that you need, and then you develop them. And to see that they've already hit in the coaches' minds, they've already shown that they are contributing players so early on in their careers, I think is a good sign. Now, you got to have more than two, right, in a class. But I don't think you have Pete Limbo saying that this freshman class is really impressive. It's a really good one. It's a bunch of ballers out there. You don't have an experienced guy like him saying that at this point unless he's seen a lot to base that on. And I think a lot of that is not just those times or numbers that you got to have to be an SEC player. A lot of that is mindset, like he's talking about. When he's saying they paid attention in my meetings, they're contributing, they're asking questions. To me, that's a sign that not only did you bring in the talent that's necessary, but you're recruiting the right kind of guy for your program. And that to me is so key. And I think it's a very fair criticism of what didn't happen enough since the heyday of Carolina football, combined with not having those difference makers. That's the combination you can't have. That's what separates good SEC programs from mediocre, and then they turn bad pretty quick. That's how it works, right? And not even to the great level, right? The great level, you got to have both of those things. You got to have supremely talented guys who are also supremely focused and team-oriented. And Carolina just hadn't quite gotten there, right? Most programs in college football, outside of the four projected to get the college football playoff, maybe you throw in Notre Dame and Oklahoma with Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama. That's it. Everybody else is trying to get to the mountaintop, and there's so many steps. It's such a long journey. But it's not all about that in college football, and that's what I loved about last night, right? No, none of us outside of Desmond Howard thinks that Pitt or West Virginia has a chance to get to the college football playoff. Has a good chance, let's say. Pitt still has a chance, obviously. But none of us are predicting that to happen outside of Desmond Howard, who can do whatever he wants to. He's got a Heisman Trophy. He knows how to express himself on television and smile the smile, play his role on College Game Day. And that role probably does include he gets to be that guy, to go outside the box and throw in some college football playoff big-time sleepers. Last year, if he had been predicting Cincinnati to go to the college football playoff, we'd all said he's crazy at this time of year. What are you talking about, Cincinnati? Get out of here, man. So I love the fact that he did it and that it happened last year with Cincinnati. I'd be pulling for Pitt in a college football playoff matchup against any of the perennial powerhouses. Don't get me wrong. But it's not likely to happen. And yet still, and this is the problem I have with anybody who is anti-expansion, that is going to tell me that if Alabama, Auburn, if there isn't a college football playoff implication like there has been recently, that the game isn't going to mean as much. Huh? I switch it over to college basketball. Like when Duke and North Carolina play, does a spot in the NCAA tournament have to be on the line for people to care about it? For us to get invested in it? No, it's a ridiculous concept to me. Just because it has always been a certain way doesn't mean it has to remain that way. I mean, that is kind of how I look at life in general, right? And maybe you look at it a different way. You're certainly allowed to have that perspective, right? That is your right. You have the right to that perspective. It's unrestricted free agent here on the show. You can have that mindset. I don't. I am of the mindset of, hey, man, different doesn't automatically mean better, but it certainly doesn't mean that it can't be better or as good just because it's different. And last night was a great example. Outside of my neighbor, outside of the CarQuest Bowl, Major Harris, like I mentioned back in the day, Dan Marino, Raynard Brown making the play of the year against Pitt. What was that, 85? 86 for South Carolina. I'm trying to think. Kenny Pickett with a fake slide last year. The upset run to the ACC championship. I got nothing attached to those two programs last night. I didn't know they were just 75 miles apart until this morning, I think. The campuses. No clue. And yet I loved everything about that game. Everything about it. So that to me is the latest, best example of what makes college football great. And then again, Penn State and Purdue. My sister-in-law went to Purdue. I've watched Drew Brees and all the quarterbacks after him, seen their offense has been pretty good through the years. Them be pretty irrelevant in the Big Ten recently as well. Penn State, one of the first programs that I saw win the national championship. And what was that, 85 back in the day? Somewhere in there. Gary Collins, one of the best quarterbacks growing up. Then the Carolina Panthers years, and I had to pull for him, being the first real franchise quarterback. James Franklin, and coming from Vanderbilt, being the personality that he is, the mess that was the end of the Joe Paterno era, Bill O'Brien taking over, all of that stuff. That has nothing to do with the odds of them to go into the college football playoff, but it has everything to do with college football and what went into last night and how I immediately flipped over after Pitt in West Virginia and completely invested in that game. 7 lead changes, I think, back and forth. That 70-plus yard interception return, pick 6 for Purdue, the puke 6. Fantastic, man. So I just don't buy that you have to have extra implications or an extra connection necessarily. College football is great. I think we can love it in so many ways. I know I said it yesterday, Nick says, but based on last season, Clayton White, one of the best halftime adjustment defensive coordinators out there. Yeah, and that's another thing I'm really interested to see this season. Again, last year, opposing offensive coordinators they were going up against Clayton White by and large for the first time ever. Oh, and this is a great place to lead us to another comment from Clayton White that I hadn't played yet here on the program and really want to do. So last year was the first personal matchup, a bit of a wild card. You can study tendencies. You can go back and look at tape, no doubt about it. But the first time going head-to-head, that is, I think, an advantage typically for a defensive coordinator. And I'm basing this a lot on what we saw early in the Muschamp years, defensively especially. We saw a massive improvement in year number 1 on the defensive side of the ball for South Carolina, which we all expected with Will Muschamp, Travaris Robinson, their reputation coming in. Year number 2, defense really solid, led them in that 9-4 season. After that, the defense became pretty bad pretty quick. And it was the same coaches. So outside of not having really, really good players, there are still good players there, right? J.C. Horn, first defensive player taken. There's still some Ernest Jones, Super Bowl champ, starting middle linebacker in the NFL in year 1. There's still some good players on the defensive side of the ball. I think offensive coordinators came to figure out what was going on the other side, or came to figure out how to confuse them, how to get them to miscommunicate or not know what was going on in the secondary. We saw that happen multiple times. We heard Matt Corral said, yeah, we knew what they're going to do before they did it. So that's what I'm basing my theory on in year number 2 under Clayton White. I agree with you, Nick. Excellent defensive adjustments at halftime. Now, I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult to make those same adjustments in year 1 and year 2 because those offensive coordinators, they know. They have that information now. They saw it last year. Nick says, hopefully, we won't need as many halftime adjustments this year. Tennessee sticks out to me specifically. No doubt. And we don't get too much into the X's and O's a lot of times on the program. To me, a lot of times that's the boring conversation that is overblown a lot of times, where we think we try to be experts on the show. And our education level or knowledge level compared to Clayton White, for instance, going into this game, it's laughable to think we would have any idea. He knows and has forgotten way more about football than I will ever know. So that's why I don't get into it too much. But I did find it interesting to hear his impressions of Georgia State based on his background as well, coming from Western Kentucky and being ultra familiar with them. So you guys, now that we are so close to the game, and it is about, okay, those guys, your players got to make plays against their players. Here's the breakdown from defensive coordinator Clayton White on what his perspective is of tomorrow.
I'm very familiar with them. It's been my 3rd time playing them. WKU was my last game actually against them. I'm glad I didn't get offered this job off the game. It was off the full body of work. But they're a good football team. The quarterback, Granger, really good player. The running back, Greg, and they have Williams at tailback, really good player. They're downhill, 227 yards a game. They have wideouts, and I think Creedle is a wide receiver, Thrash, along with Dixon. Great makeups of guys who can get down the field and run, get in space. The tight end, Payne, other tight end, Laney's pretty good. Payne last year was a backup, so he's probably excited about his new expanded role. The offensive line is very experienced, 62, 64, 73, 79, and then the Eastern Illinois transfer. So he's strong as well. So it's a good club. It's a really good football team, and they're physical. They have a lot of pride, and so do we.
You want to break down from a coach. That's about as detailed as you can get. I thought it was interesting, all the names he mentioned. A lot of times these coaches, they get in in the film room. Why it's called film, I have no idea. It's all digital these days. But you get to watching a bunch of tape. It's not a tape. You get to watch a bunch of footage of the opposing team, and you get bogged down. Tommy Bowden was that guy, the worst. I felt like he would just say numbers because you could just see it and hear it, like how that's just how he was going about it, right? Because it changes every week, so you don't names. I can hear that it's pretty personal for Clayton White, having gone through the multiple matchups and then having Georgia State stick it to him pretty good in that last one at Western Kentucky, like he's talking about. No, it's the next level for him, and it's how I think we become accustomed to hearing about these big time matchups that South Carolina plays through the years: the Georgias, the Clemsons, the Texas A&Ms, Florida through the years, where we know the other players because they're some of the best in college football. We just know their names. Well, that's not the case with Georgia State, right? But in Clayton White's mind and from his perspective, it absolutely is. He's plenty familiar with all those guys. And you just heard it there. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, it helps him as well to have one of the best players in college football, or certainly he's being predicted to be that this year, and Cam Smith out on the edge. Rick Henry from WIS, an interesting question in that weekly press conference with defensive coordinator Clayton White here.
Going back to Cam, does he have the right mixture of temperament, confidence, maybe a little ego, and some nasty in him that makes him successful back there?
Absolutely. He's definitely the kind of defensive back and football player that every coach wished they had on their team in regards of the entire makeup of a legitimate cover corner that can cover most guys in the country. Yes, he does. He definitely does, without a doubt.
You couldn't have a much better endorsement than that, could you? And it was a little surprising because Cam Smith has a reputation of being the biggest and maybe best trash talker on the team. And that doesn't always go hand in hand with how coaches prefer their players to be. But I think maybe from a corner, you get the exception there that you have to have that type mentality, or maybe that's the best one to have. I wish he would have finished that by saying we're going to kill him. Talking about Clayton White. That's from DC. Well done, DC. I think you just called it for me. You just called your shot. I got no problem with you calling your shot on this program.
I ain't gonna lie, he's just gonna go out there and kill him. You know, it's not too much to it. He's just gonna go out there and ball. He's just gonna go out there and kill him. He's just gonna go out there and kill him.
Juice Wells. Again, putting the target on his back, saying that kind of stuff, but also showing a lot of confidence. Confident? I don't know if that's how I would put Sean Elliott's mindset going into this thing. He's a confident guy, clearly. But that's never one of the words that I've used to describe him. It's always been intense, right? High energy, physical is how his teams are described, I think. And that makes sense. I mean, he'd get in there and mix it up with the offensive lineman. Made, I think, a reputation for himself by and large because of those preseason shenanigans, or pregame shenanigans, I should say. So I don't think confidence is the right word. There's got to be so many different emotions, and you kind of hear it when he was asked about coming back and playing at Williams-Brice Stadium. I'll let you see and listen to that now. Former Gamecock interim head coach, and the only guy who was a holdover from the Steve Spurrier to Will Muschamp staff, and that only lasted a year, and then he moved on to be the head coach at Georgia State and has done a pretty good job overall. And now he's returning back, the Camden native, coming back to Columbia at Williams-Brice tomorrow night as the head coach at Georgia State.
And walking back into Williams-Brice, to be on the other sideline is something that I've never had to do, to be honest with you. Maybe a scrimmage, I was over there one day, but it's going to be thrilling. In all honesty, it's going to be awesome. Going back in there to play the University of South Carolina. Grew up 25 miles away. A lot of games that I watched there, a lot of games that I've won there, won a state championship there, and now we're taking our team, the Georgia State Panthers, back there to open up our season. So, yeah, that's going to be, hopefully a great night.
Man, I can't imagine. But I don't think it's necessarily an advantage for Sean Elliott, but we'll see. When Skip Holtz came back with Louisiana Tech a couple of years ago, he got real close to pulling off an upset. And it had to be a little different. Skip Holtz came to South Carolina in a much different situation, as already had been a successful head coach with UConn before they had even gone full FBS at that point. Been the son of a legend in Lou Holtz and coming back to work with your father as the offensive coordinator, a different deal for sure. Sean Elliott has like the local connection, the kind of DNA stuff that isn't a part of most opposing head coaches coming into Carolina. I mean, former assistant, former interim coach. Most of us will never forget the visor holding it up, going out that first game after Steve Spurrier retired. And Sean Elliott was the guy, and he loved being the guy. And he instantly changed. He made his impression on the program, right? Playing music at practice, modernizing things in a lot of ways. But Carolina also lost to the Citadel when Sean Elliott was the interim head coach at Carolina. And he was right back as assistant the next year under Will Muschamp, and then on to Georgia State, where, I mean, it was a couple of years ago going into Tennessee, and after that game, remember playing comments from him, hearing his comments about, yeah, I've been in the SEC before. I know what that league's about. And so you know all of that is being dangled as a carrot for his guys and has been in the preseason. So from the Georgia State perspective, I mean, they even got the personal connections. Jamias Williams as their number 2 running back, having played and started a bunch of games in a Carolina uniform in the defensive secondary, and then basically just quit midseason or got kicked off midseason. I don't know what the heck happened. I don't know if we'll ever know that story. Didn't play well against Missouri and then wasn't on the team on Monday that week. Crazy. And then goes back to a lot closer to home and switches over to the offensive side of the ball. So you got that, and then you got the reverse of that, right? You got Jordan Strawn, former Georgia State national sack leader, comes to South Carolina, does the transfer up thing. A lot of it for a nutrition program to get bigger, to have a better shot at getting to the NFL. He's been on the field. Hasn't necessarily been, I think, impressive. I think is probably the best word, right? Been solid, but hasn't raised a lot of eyebrows in his Carolina career as one season last year. But will be counted on, is being counted on now. Jordan Birch, guys that need to take a next step and need to get in the backfield, be disruptive. Tackles for loss has been an issue for Carolina in the last several years, for a while now. Needs to improve. He needs to be one of those guys that has clearly been kind of developed, is taking a next step kind of deal. Yeah, DC, good point. Gave Clemson a run that year. Yeah, Perry Orth at Williams-Brice Stadium, lighting it up against Deshaun Watson. No doubt, man. Elliott did have us ready for Clemson that year. Nick also points out, turned out to be a good game and pretty close. You're right. So if I mentioned the Citadel, I should mention Clemson. But again, John's just ready to spot the ball. He's ready to go. And that's the most difficult part, especially about today and then the night game. At least you got plenty of college football to get you through. But after having such good games last night, not just the backyard brawl, but then the Penn State, Purdue, and then you got some games today, right? Was it Michigan State, Western Michigan, the only top 25 matchup, I think? And then the Friday night thing's weird. So if you're into high school football, at least you got that and kind of the normal routine. If you need to get a college football fix tonight, you can. But it just doesn't have the feel. It won't have the feel of last night. unless Western Michigan tests Michigan State, which they're not expected to do. Probably won't get anywhere close to what last night was. And then at least you got game day to start tomorrow. And then you got a noon game, I think a good matchup in NC State and East Carolina. A couple of good 3:30 games. Let's go through them now that I'm thinking about it. So chronologically is the best way I can go through things. And before we do that, I just wanted to recap real quick. So 38-31, the final score, that pick six, the difference, and hit West Virginia so close to being right on the 1 yard line there in the final seconds. But that fourth down catch just did wobble when it came to the ground, was ruled incomplete. Sean Clifford, the hero last night for Penn State after not playing so well most of the game, kind of like it, most of his now 6-year career. He was perfect in the last drive. Came up clutch when they needed it. There was a puke six in that game if you haven't seen it. And if you have, again, if you're putting that on your social media timeline without warning people, come on, man. That's not cool. 35-31, that final score. 7 lead changes, I think, in that game. Back and forth. Fantastic. Tennessee, Mizzou, Wake, no problems in their openers last night. Don't know what we can take away from that other than all three of those, I think. All three of those programs remain problems from the South Carolina perspective. The Gamecocks against Tennessee and Mizzou, and Clemson with Wake. SC State, 56-10, the final score against Central Florida. The illegal forward punt will be replayed a bunch in that game from SC State. The Citadel losing on the road to Campbell 29-10. Furman blowing out North Greenville 52-0. So those are the South Carolina takes. And then tomorrow, noon, NC State at East Carolina. That is a backyard brawl-ish feel, I think. That has that type of rivalry. Now, maybe not, I don't know. I think it's real close, right? Not a conference game. I guess it's not in state, but I'm guessing 75 miles is somewhere in the vicinity of the distance between Greenville, North Carolina, and Raleigh, the campuses. East Carolina probably not to the level of either West Virginia or Pitt. I think that's fair, but they're not far from it. And NC State and Pitt right there together. Pitt was 17 going into last night's game. NC State preseason 13 ranked. I think Pitt might be picked to win their division more than NC State is because NC State in the same division as Clemson. And there's still people picking NC State to be kind of a dark horse college football playoff type contender this year. Devin Leary getting a bunch of preseason love. A lot like Kenny Pickett maybe last year this time. So you got that game at noon, then 3:30, you got 2 games. And this is week 2 and week 3 opponents for the Gamecocks. Georgia being in week 3, ranked number 3, taking on Oregon in Atlanta. Still 17-point favorite. All the question marks about what will Georgia's defense be, especially replacing so many guys drafted off of last year's national championship team. Stetson Bennett's shaved his head, so watch out. I mean, that guy, the quarterback on the national championship winning team at a place like Georgia, and still somehow not given national respect. I mean, that JT Daniels, the fact that JT Daniels last night was the quarterback of West Virginia, mind-boggling to me. It just, again, shows where we are in college football. Spencer Rattler is going to be the quarterback for South Carolina, so all bets are kind of off when it comes to that. What will Oregon be? First year after Mario Cristobal has left and gone to Miami. The Pac-12 in shambles from a conference standpoint with UCLA and the Southern Cal News. Oregon being a very valuable one, probably the most valuable athletics department out there now, shopping themselves around the Big Ten, allegedly. Always the reputation of not being good enough to play with the SEC's best. Can help to change that tomorrow. But they're not expected to. I mean, Vegas, the boys in Vegas, disrespectful. 17 points. Only 6 points for the college football playoff team in Cincinnati. going to Arkansas, the week 2 opponent for the Gamecocks. Arkansas expected to exert its will from a run standpoint, but not to a dominant standpoint. 6-point favorite going into that sucker. Virginia Tech, Old Dominion, Illinois, Indiana, TCU, and Colorado. I don't know where that came from, John. Missouri played last night, DC. Handled Louisiana Tech. Game day tomorrow, I would imagine. You got to be. I mean, maybe not. Maybe it's a Fox thing at Notre Dame, Ohio State. So then they would be in Atlanta, right, for Oregon and Georgia. Just guessing. Daddy-O. He's done this before. He's a pro. Take notes if you need to. Smoker on standby. Butt in the fridge. Projector and screen. Patiently waiting. Cooler fully iced down. It's a Southern Boys' best weekend of the year. Well done, sir. Cooler's already iced down? It must be a heck of a cooler. Probably a lot better than the cheap coolers that I use. Yeah, I know Daddy-O, West Virginia campus, less than 5 miles from the Pennsylvania state line up in Morgantown. What is that? Is that 81 up there you drive? You can make that drive and you can go to New York that way. I did that one time. Wife's originally from Connecticut. Headed up that way. I didn't realize that until that drive that West Virginia and Pennsylvania are so close. Oh, 86 miles. Well done, Chris. Thank you. Researching the program. We'll give you a producer credit for the show. Well played. A Gamecock guy. I look for the D-line and the secondary to look like some well-developed, mature guys who want to be great every play. The talent is there. Okay. And are you saying that you're not going to see that from linebackers? Linebackers got a chance to make a reputation for themselves. Mo Kaba, especially, getting the starting nod over Sherrod Green on the depth chart, whatever that means. Brad Johnson. If those guys are going to make plays, they're going to raise some eyebrows. Yeah, Washington talking to the Big Ten. I hear you, John. That's the word. Nick asking if I'm going to the game. Absolutely. As long as tomorrow's 4 scheduled practices go well with my 9 and 7-year-old, two teams each, then I'll probably be less energetic than a normal season opener type deal. We'll see. But yeah, that's the plan. Sister, parents, the whole thing. Family tradition. Daddy-O says, just want to see a well-oiled machine tomorrow night. That's all. Well, that's all. Well-oiled machine, in my mind, is one of the highest compliments you can pay a college football team. Like, they're just a well-oiled machine, man. I mean, everything is just smooth and at the highest level, right? Operating tremendously. I think what we heard from Shane Beamer from a coach's perspective is what you typically hear, right? Just want to see clean football. No evidence of being a poorly coached team. That's what you want to see, especially in week 1, where it's easy to pop up, right? And Pete Limbo in his weekly press conference, good stuff, I thought. 2 things he says critical for early season success from a football perspective. Number 1, a good culture, because you will see well-conditioned players if you have a good culture, right, that put in the time and the effort and the whole thing. I think that's how I translated where he was coming from there. You will see guys who, in moments of adversity, not pointing fingers or splintering kind of thing, you will see a team coming together. Number 2, according to Pete Limbo, what you got to have early season success in college football is you don't beat yourself. And to me, there's a difference there. It's well-oiled machine at the top of the totem pole, and then it's don't beat yourself several notches below. So I think if you're saying just want to see something, you got to start at kind of clean football. Don't beat yourself. No dumb penalties. No delay of games. Get the communication in. Get the plays in at the right time. Saw it a couple of times last night. Forget which one it was. I think it was, I want to say it was the Pitt quarterback, Keaton Slovis, that was ticked off about not getting a play in fast enough, and you're just seeing the whine, like the clock whine symbol, the one finger rolling it up. But I didn't see that often last night, and that was part of why it was such a good night of college football in my mind. That's hard to watch at any level. It's hard to watch, and it's real frequent for teams that aren't coached well. It's a clear sign of lack of preparation, and that is something that you can control. Your own operation, how you communicate, what kind of discipline your team has pre-snap, formation-wise, the whole thing. Nick says, looking forward to seeing how much we target our tight ends. Got a nice stable of them. Oh, Nick, going to be that guy. I feel like you're setting yourself up, man. Setting yourself up to be that. Why didn't you throw the tight end more guy? I think we got to change the way we talk about Jaheim Bell. He's not a tight end. That guy is a football player. I mean, like, we're changing the way we're talking about Deebo Samuel, right? In the NFL, with him taking so many snaps as running back, I think you're going to see Jaheim Bell get some carries as well. And tight ends don't line up in the backfield. They don't get handoffs. Let's refer to him as an H-back, or I don't know what we call him. But I get what you're saying, Nick. Austin Stogner as a transfer, Trayvon Kenyon. There is talent there. There is always talent at tight end at South Carolina. But this year, yeah, I think it might be way up there. I mean, we saw Hayden Hurst become a first-round draft pick, so that wasn't that long ago. Nick Muse just was a sixth-round pick by the Vikings. I know he got cut. I think I'm guessing. I haven't looked into it, but I'm guessing he's on the practice squad there. Troy says, no concert tomorrow, Tim? No, they're not being Craig here. Did not buy concert tickets without realizing it was a September 3rd. Interesting from BW here. Just want to see Josh Vann and Marshawn Lloyd have 100-yard games. Jordan Birch, Boogie Huntley each have 2 sacks. That's it? That's asking for a lot, man, especially the 2 sacks each from Jordan Birch and Boogie Huntley. But I'd say my question would be how many sacks total, would be acceptable for the Gamecock defense. I'd say you get 5, you're really happy. 5 sacks is a good day on D. To me, it's more about getting pressure and being disruptive, because that stat can be such a lie, right? Especially when you play spread teams that get the ball out so quick, and you don't even a lot of times have 5 opportunities. If that team really respects your pass rush, you don't get 5 opportunities to get to the quarterback. You probably get 5, right? You don't get a ton of opportunities because they know they have schemed up, which is the ultimate kind of respect. They know they can't protect. And so that stat can be skewed. Great show and discussion as always, Steven says. But before you go, Strider, Wright, and Freed, the best 3 pitchers for the Braves ever. Steven trying to slide that in there. Strider, Wright, and Freed are fantastic. Don't get me wrong. Strider just broke John Smoltz's record, right? With 16 strikeouts last night, most ever in a 9-inning game. Max Fried is fantastic. Kyle Wright's got 17 wins, I think, this year. Don't get me wrong. I love them. But they still got a ways to go to be Smoltz, Maddox, and Glavine. All right. Different organization. Throw it out there. Got no problem with that. The Braves with those 3 Hall of Famers. Easy, Steve. I love the optimism, though. I'll give you a pass on the day before college football season kicks off. Nick says, we haven't addressed this, and it's very serious. Did Brent Venables take his get-back guy with him to Oklahoma? It may decide how well they do this year. I think that was probably the first phone call, right? You have to. And the word is Oklahoma's culture has improved under Brent Venables, so we'll see what that means. Can't control production, but you can control effort, Daddy-O says. Yeah, I think that's what mainly Gamecock fans want to see. And I think if you get ultimate effort, you're going to get a win against Georgia State. Happy football, everybody. A bunch to talk about on Tuesday. Yeah, that's when we'll be back talking about so much football. It'll be a massive cluster of a show because there will be so much to discuss. Maybe I'll decide to go Monday morning, just a Labor Day special. Who knows? But planning right now to do Tuesday morning again. Roger says, have a great weekend. Go Gamecocks. Hey, this preseason, it's been the first time I've ever done it like this, right? Just sitting here, pushing buttons with you straight to the internet. Thank you guys for being a part of this show. I am wildly excited about the football season. First of all, just from a fan's perspective, right? But secondly, because we get to do this every weekday morning and you guys make it happen. It is greatly appreciated. B-Dub, no, thanks for what you do. Thanks for being a part of the program. I mentioned Ken's earlier, saw he was a new subscriber on the YouTube channel. If you guys haven't done that, please do. If you know anybody who's interested in Gamecock football, please let them know about the program. Love to have them in on the show. The more perspectives, the more fun this thing gets. And I think the 2022 season is going to be a fun one in so many ways, especially from the Gamecock football discussion standpoint. Thank you again. Have a great first weekend of college football. It is great to say that. And thanks for being a part of Unrestricted Free Agent September 2nd, 2022 edition in the books.